Have you ever stopped to actually think about the invisible, sweeping economic forces that shape, well, the everyday products sitting right there in your shopping cart? Today, we're using India's massive, rapid transformation as our lens to understand exactly how this all works. It's a genuinely fascinating story of markets, money, and millions of people.
Think back just a couple of decades. Remember when Indian roads were basically just a sea of identical Ambassador and Fiat cars? Today, practically every major global brand is right there in the local showroom. And you see the exact same explosion of brands with mobile phones, shirts, televisions, you name it. So how did our markets transform so rapidly from having almost no variety to this absolute abundance of global choices? Okay, let's dive into this explosion of consumer choice and figure out exactly what happened.
Today, we're covering the rise of globalization, how MNCs connect the world, the engines of change, the winners of globalization, the cost of competition, and finally, striking a fair balance. We're going to logically break down the mechanics, the technology, and the real-world human impact of this massive topic step by step.
Section 1. The rise of globalization, from local trade to global interconnection. Up until the mid-20th century, trade was pretty simple. Mostly, it was just raw materials, foodstuff, and finished goods crossing borders. It was a highly localized system.
Globalization completely changed that. It is the process of rapid integration or interconnection between countries, primarily through foreign trade and investments. This is a massive shift, guys. It's not just about shipping finished goods on a boat anymore. It's all about moving far beyond domestic markets and deeply integrating the actual process of production on a global scale. Section 2. How MNCs connect the world, the global assembly line. So who are the primary architects of this interconnectedness? They're the massive, powerful engines driving production across all these borders. We're talking about the multinational corporation, or MNC. An MNC is a company that owns or controls production in more than one nation. Their ultimate driving goal is incredibly simple: lower costs, higher profits. And their scale, it is mind-blowing. Many of these giants have accumulated wealth that actually exceeds the entire national budgets of developing countries. That is an incredible amount of power and influence. And this brilliantly illustrates how they build a global assembly line. An MNC producing the phone in your pocket right now might design it in research centers in the USA, manufacture the components in China because, well, it's a cheap manufacturing location, assemble everything in Mexico to be right next door to US markets, and then handle customer care from India using highly skilled English-speaking engineers. This isn't random, it's hyper-efficient. By doing this, an MNC can achieve massive 50 to 60% cost savings. To build that global assembly line, MNCs make massive foreign investments. This is the money spent to buy hard assets, like land, buildings, and machines in another country. For example, back in 1995, the American giant Ford Motors spent a whopping 1,700 crore rupees to set up a massive plant near Chennai. Another incredibly effective strategy is to simply buy up existing local companies. Cargill Foods, a huge American MNC, bought Perak Foods in India, instantly taking over their highly reputed brand for oil refineries and their extensive marketing network. Section 3. The engines of change, technology and policy. So we know the what and the who. Let's look at the dual catalysts that made this modern era of globalization even possible. The first massive catalyst is technology. Advancements in information technology act as the central nervous system for global trade. Because of computers, satellites, and the internet, a news magazine meant for readers in London can be beautifully designed on a computer in Delhi, the text sent instantly via email, and the payment processed in milliseconds through e-banking. This literally dissolves geographical borders. The second catalyst is government policy, specifically liberalization. This means removing the barriers or restrictions set by the government on foreign trade and investment. For India, a massive policy shift happened around 1991. The country moved away from its strict post-independence protectionism, deciding it was finally time to open its doors, remove heavy import taxes, and allow Indian producers to face global competition head-on. But what happens when you throw those doors wide open? When trade was liberalized in India, Chinese toy manufacturers swooped in, exporting plastic toys and offering cheaper prices with fresh new designs. The result? Chinese toy makers expanded their business rapidly. But for the local Indian toy makers, this created intense friction. They faced severe losses and falling sales as their higher-priced toys simply stopped selling. Foreign trade deeply connects global markets, but as we've seen, it can be incredibly disruptive locally.
Section 4. The winners of globalization, consumers and corporate giants. Knowing it's disruptive, who actually benefits?
So the crucial point is that the benefits definitely haven't been uniform. Well-off urban consumers are winning with vastly more choice, better quality, and lower prices. Foreign MNCs are obviously expanding their markets and padding their profits, but importantly, top Indian companies like Tata Motors and Infosys have utilized this competition to raise their own standards and emerge as massive multinationals themselves. Plus, sectors like IT and services have seen absolutely massive job creation, leading governments to even set up special economic zones to attract more of this wealth. Section 5. The cost of competition, the unequal impact on labor. But there's a harsh flip side to this incredible growth. What happens to the millions of people who simply can't compete with massive, well-funded global forces?
Now, what's really interesting about this is it comes down to one staggering number: 110 million workers. That is 11 crore people employed in India's small and medium industries, making things like batteries, plastics, and dairy products. It's the largest employment sector in the country, next to agriculture. And crucially, these are the workers most directly vulnerable to sudden, fierce global competition.
Let's put a human face to that massive statistic. Meet Ravi. He took a loan, built a successful small-scale business manufacturing electronic capacitors, and proudly employed 20 workers. But when import restrictions were removed as part of a WTO agreement in 2001, cheaper MNC components flooded the local market. Ravi's major clients started importing instead of buying from him. To survive, he was forced to brutally cut his workforce down to just 7 people. The friction hits the factory floor just as hard. Take Sushila. She used to be a permanent garment worker with health insurance, a provident fund, and double overtime. But to win orders from massive European and American MNCs, Indian exporters had to aggressively slash costs. The result? Flexible employment. Sushila lost her permanent benefits. Now she works as a temporary worker 7 days a week from 7:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. just to make ends meet. The intense pressure for MNCs to maximize profits leads directly to these grueling local labor conditions. Section 6. Striking a fair balance, the WTO and global negotiations. So how on earth do we manage these incredible competing tensions on a global scale? Well, that's where the World Trade Organization, or WTO, comes into play. If we compare the agricultural sectors of the US and India, we see a major global debate unfold. The US agriculture sector makes up just 1% of its GDP and a tiny 0.5% of employment, yet it receives massive financial subsidies from the US government. This allows them to sell farm products at abnormally low prices globally. Contrast that with India, where agriculture provides the bulk of both GDP and employment, yet developing nations are heavily pressured by international rules to actually cut their government support to farmers. This imbalance naturally creates deep frustration. Listen to this plea from developing nations at the WTO. We have reduced trade barriers, but you have ignored the rules. Is this free and fair trade? This perfectly captures the incredibly complex, high-stakes negotiations and the deep friction happening right now between developing and developed nations regarding what fair trade actually means. Let's move on and see how this builds into actionable solutions. So, what are the concrete paths forward? Well, governments can step up to ensure labor laws are strictly enforced so workers aren't exploited. They can actively support small producers to modernize their technology so they can actually compete. They can aggressively negotiate for fairer rules at the WTO. And importantly, they can align with other developing countries to collectively push back against unfair trade domination. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from the macro strategies of billion-dollar corporations to the grueling daily realities of local factory workers. Since globalization is an undeniable reality that isn't going anywhere, I want to leave you with this. How do we ensure its benefits are shared fairly among all? Think critically about your own consumer habits and reflect on the incredibly complex, often invisible human chain behind the products you buy every single day. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.